Welcome back to the Mindset Mutiny, the podcast where we don't sugarcoat the truth, we don't back down from hard conversations, and we sure as hell don't settle for mediocrity. This is about pushing limits, smashing through self-imposed barriers, and showing up in the world as your most relentless and authentic self. Today, I've got someone special here, someone who embodies that mindset, someone I'm proud to call a friend and a guiding light. This guy doesn't just talk about self-growth. He lives it. Kyle is the vice president of franchise business at Orange Theory Fitness. He supports 1,500 studios with $1.3 billion in revenue. But that's just the day job. Kyle doesn't stop there. He's a man who thrives on momentum, the driving force behind the annual Charity Murph Workout that was a catalyst for change in my life. Kyle's raised over $47,000 to push people past their limits for a cause that matters. He's relentless in everything he does, whether it's leading in business, challenging himself in fitness, or turning his passion for cars into a craft. Kyle's not afraid to get his hands dirty in business, in fitness, and in life. We pushed each other through our first grueling half marathon, and now we're stepping into a whole new arena together. We're starting jiu-jitsu this Monday. Kyle's the kind of guy who shows up, pushes hard, and inspires everyone around him to do the same. So today we're diving into the power of momentum, how to build it, how to sustain it, and why the people you surround yourself will make or break your progress. We're talking about what it means to challenge each other, to hold each other accountable, and to keep striving for more. So buckle up. No more hiding. No more excuses. It's time to meet Kyle Hatem. So let's get into it. What's up, Kyle? Welcome. It's hard to believe that we're going to be choking each other out in a few days.
It's great to be here, man. That's a hell of an intro and a little bit of a history lesson on all we've been through. Some cool stuff.
It's well earned. Really
Yeah.
is. You've been a guiding light for me. I mentioned that, and that's the truth. So I appreciate you setting the standard, giving us something to follow. It's been a long time. I'm trying to think. We've known of each other or met each other. What has it been, about 4 years or 3 years?
Yeah, I have to go back. The first day we met in person was at the Murph, right? And that was
Yep.
2022.
22.
Would have been like May 2022 was the first one.
Cool.
So,
So
yeah, man.
that was awesome. Just we'll get into that because that was a big change in my life. That was a big turning point for me.
Mine too. Yeah. Really
Yeah,
special day.
you guys did a great job, and it's something that resonates with me quite a lot. But we'll break that down. But more importantly, what do you have in the garage for us tonight? That's what I really need to hear you explain.
It's funny. I was trying to think of where a good spot to sit. I wanted somewhere nice and quiet. And down here, obviously in the dead of winter, it's nice and quiet in here. But I've got this is my kind of little bit of a passion area. I've got two Porsches behind me. That's the white one over here is a 2002 996 turbo, kind of heavily modded. It's almost like a GT2 replica, but upgraded turbos. Rear wheel drive conversion. It's making roughly 600 wheel horsepower. That's a car I chased after for years. Really wanted it since I was 10 years old, pretty much, and finally unlocked that a couple of years ago. And I've got an air cooled 911 SC Targa here. That one was kind of like an opportunistic, find that I fell in love with. I've had that car for a while. I originally didn't even really think I was going to keep it, but here it lies a few years later. But really just kind of fun, bone stock, 80s air cooled vibe. And then over you can see the corner of my 99 Mustang Cobra. It's under the knife. It's actually been apart for about a year or so now, and that car I've had since high school, actually. So that was kind of started the whole sickness or addiction to motorsports and cars that has kind of driven me in many ways ever since I was a kid. Kind of inherited it from my dad, right? Like he was a car guy growing up. He had a couple cool cars, and he kind of got out of the sports car game after I was born, and got he was into like mini trucks. I shouldn't say mini trucks, not like we had a couple of modified Chevy 1500s and always like, some hopped up pickup trucks and Hummer H1. And I remember when we were kids, actually, we used to be big into skateboarding, and he actually went and test drove a yellow 996. I think it was a 4S, but similar to look to this car. He like showed up when my brother and I were at a skate park. He showed up, he was test driving it, and like we hopped in the car and went for a drive, and it was like it's ingrained in my brain. And that was,
That's
it was like
right.
2002, 2003, something like that. And like now I've got like a car like that sitting in the garage. It's kind of cool. But yeah, cars are a big motivator. I know you know that as well.
That's right. Yeah, for me, I think it's always been about the cars. If I really think back, people are like, "Oh, why do you spend all your money on cars and this and that?" And it's kind of like, I don't know, since day one, I was younger, first car I had, every dime I spent on it, that's why I worked. That's why I got a job, So now it's like, I don't know, I'm just a little bit older and things haven't seemed to change. After that last build that I did, I gotta let the bank account fill back up. That S2000 broke the bank account for sure. But we have to get the cars together this year for sure.
Oh yeah,
It was
lots.
nice cruising over to that Cars and Coffee with you, man. It was exciting. I was super stoked about that.
It took us too long to do that. I think it was a good end to the season, but yeah, we'll get some good miles on them. And like you said, I mean, cars are something you got to kind of be strategic and make sure you're not putting yourself in a hole, because it's easy to do that. You start building stuff or buying too many or whatever. Um, but they do pay off, and it can really help drive you to success.
Well, I think that none of this would be possible if it weren't for the mindset, right? You don't see people driving around cars that are modified or high end vehicles that don't have some layer of drive and determination to succeed, right? So what is filling your garage is no mistake, right? It's mom and dad didn't buy them for you, right? You had to put in that work and you had to develop yourself over the years to be able to have a collection like that. And it's very special. And I think a lot of people understand the level of that collection that you started. And I can't wait to see it grow because I know you are searching for another vehicle at some point along the lines here.
Yeah, I try not to search too much, but I always find myself looking for something. But yeah, it's funny too, because like, I've never, some people always say like I made, came from absolutely nothing. Like, my parents are like, moderately successful, like mid to upper class people, and they were always entrepreneurs, had that like entrepreneurial spirit. And, like my parents helped me buy this car, but it was, I was in high school, and it was like, basically I worked, nonstop for my dad, landscaping, and I had two other jobs. And I was like, he never paid me for landscaping. He's like, I'll help you get this car, but it's like you're going to keep working and not getting paid, kind of thing.
That's right.
But,
That's fair.
but yeah, and it wasn't like one of those things where you see people get kind of like quote unquote handed a car and then they kind of treat it like crap. Like everything that I ever had growing up was like, treated it like it was a child. Always took care of it. I mean, this car again, it's like coming up on 17 years that I've had it, and it kind of keeps getting better. Like how many people out there have their first high school car that is still nice and like presentable and stuff. Like it's kind of uncommon, so it's been cool to me to kind of keep it going all those years.
I sold my high school car 2 years ago. It was a very sad day. Didn't
I
have
don't think I
anywhere to
knew
keep
that.
it. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it was really hard to part with, man. To be honest with you, like I think about it all the time, and it wasn't anything special, like like the Mustang, but it was still, it's like how I got started tuning Hondas. Like that's what it was, like 2003 Honda Accord, with a K series in it, and that was like just what I ended up getting into and loving, and it was so loyal to me for so long. I'd stored it for so many years, like just dragging this car around with me, and I was like, you know what? If I want to get another car, I got to make room, and yeah, as soon as the S2000 came around, I ended up getting rid of the Honda Accord and sold it to somebody for, I think it was like honestly 30% of what I paid for it brand new, like after like it was a 2003. So that was pretty sweet, but it was immaculate, man. So I understand, the keeping the things nice and really taking pride in what you have. And it's just like a saying I always use is, how you do anything is how you do everything. So
Yes, sir.
the
Man.
cars isn't the cars isn't this is just that's not just the way that you do things, right? That translates throughout your entire life, and I can see that in what you do every day. So the level of detail and the drive, the dedication, all that stuff is very apparent in you. So so yeah, so thanks for coming on, man. It's taken us a while coordinate with your busy schedule and mine. And I'm excited, man. So thanks for setting aside some time.
Yeah, it's been really cool, dude. You've been really killing it, and the consistency, right? Is like that's how you're gonna keep this thing growing, and you getting good people on. Like it's actually really inspiring. It's been awesome to see you kind of really lean in, and I can tell you're
Yeah, man.
passionate. And hearing your story too, I mean, it resonates with a lot of people.
It's funny. I've had a friend on who kind of started with me like right at my worst, and he didn't even know like really the situation. And had him on the podcast recently. And I've like he mentioned to me, he's like, like, dude, you've kind of like buried that. You haven't really talked about it, investigated it. You just kind of like one day you woke up and you're like, I'm a different person no matter what happens. And sometimes I think you need to do those things. But if I look back and I read my journals back and when those times were really bad, I'm very proud of myself. In a way, to have been able to beat my brain right when I wanted to, when it was totally malfunctioning. But I think what is really the takeaway is that I did it with physical. Uh, I did it with exercise, man. Like I did it with challenging myself physically and creating those endorphins to help my brain heal from whatever the depression, anxiety, and all the other things that come with that. And then, at the rock bottom there, it was tough, but man, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It really was. And, that like would kind of lead into the Murph, right? Where, that I was so uncomfortable with going to that thing. Like, I'm like, what do you mean? We're going to do 100 pull-ups. We're going to do 300 squats and like we're gonna do 200 push-ups or something like that. Like, what am I? How the fuck am I gonna do that? I can't even do a pull-up. So I wanted to go so bad. I wanted to meet you, because Nick has always said great things about you, and I've been watching you from social media, and you've done a lot for me in that regard. So I figured out how to do a pull-up. And it was the first time I'd ever done one in my life. And I started running, some miles. And I remember just started on the treadmill 1 mile. And it was, I was out of shape at the time. And then that turned into something completely different. So then I kept running. And then I ended up doing that Newburyport race, right, where I ran a 5:38 mile with my buddy Ben. And then I came and was doing that with you, and I saw all the like minds that were there, and it was just such a good environment, and the energy was so strong, and that created some more momentum for me, right? To then be like, oh, okay, hey, look at what Kyle's doing, and that's great. I want to be a part of this, and then I start following you, start watching you closer, and I start seeing the things that you're doing, how you're executing. Then we talk about diet, we talk about all these different things, and you've helped me with some of that stuff. And given me something to follow, right? When I didn't have anything to really model off of, I looked to you and I said, look at, this is what I want to do. He's got the cars, he's got the build, he's in good shape, takes care of himself. He's got great people around him. Like I want a part of that. And I think that's what's kind of brought us together. And I guess for everybody listening, it's not like you and me see each other all the time. It's like, and I think that's something that kind of needs to be stated, right?
Truly, yeah, and it's funny to hear you say like I can go back and again even over say it's probably been 15 years or so since I started like getting into fitness in some way, but I was like kind of half-assing it for a while, and really kind of closer to maybe like 2018, 2019, I started to like lean into fitness a lot more and like started to feel all the impact that it had around my life. And obviously led to the Murph. And when we get into that more, like we'll go into kind of how that's really kind of impacted me, but hearing, how much it helped drive you and like want to be, addicted to that environment. I feel like once we started getting connected, here we go. We ran the half marathon a few months back now, and that's like it was kind of I kind of lean on you for making me do that. So it's like you return the favor several years later, where I kind of told you I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a half marathon, but I don't know, it scares the crap out of me. I'm not like never been a distance runner, and then I get a screenshot from you of like just registered, like sign up, you know, and we did it. So like we've kind of fed off each other over the years, and like you know that the day of that half marathon, I probably hadn't seen you in person since I don't even know since the last
Yeah.
Murph or something. You know,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I talk about that, like how important your circle is, and I did an episode on where I talked about like your circle doesn't have to be somebody you see all the time or somebody that you're with every day. In fact, it most of the time it's not. But you're totally underselling yourself on that half marathon because and I'm going to clear that story up because it needs to be told. So because I thought it was like one of the most badass things ever with the way it all went down. So I can remember I was really excited about running the progress I was making, and I was we were kind of texting back and forth or messaging on Instagram, and I told you, hey, listen, you should think about running. It's like one of the hardest things like that you can really put yourself through. It's like second to second, you're battling yourself, right? And of course, like you're not going to turn that offer down. You're like, oh man, if there's something out there that's going to like sharpen my sword, like I'm going to get after that. So, I remember you like took a couple of 4 mile runs. And you're like, dude, like my calf, like this and that. And I was like, just fucking keep running, you'll be good. So of course you did. And I can remember the exact moment I was out to dinner with my wife, and I happened to get like I thought it was a text message, or it could have been a story that you posted about your run. You did like an 8 mile up near the beach, beautiful views. It was the longest I think you've run, and I think I might have just said, "Hey, dude, like not surprised, like keep it going." And then you came back with, "Dude, it was awesome. Like I loved every second of it. I was kind of tired, but it was great." And then you're like, a friend of mine told me that I should do this half marathon that's coming up, and I was sitting there and deep down, I'm like, oh, like, shit, I don't want to do that. Like I can remember sitting there and I was like, this night I was having a couple drinks with my wife, and I don't drink that much. And I was like, really kind of like, oh my God, here I am having like a martini, and this guy wants to do a half marathon. And there's no way I'm fucking not telling him I'm going to do it. So right there. And then I just looked at my wife. I said, hey, I'm going to do a half marathon on this day. And I sign up, and then I send it to you. And I'm like, hey, dude, signed up. And you're like, all right, I'll see you there. And I mean, that's just the fucking way it works. Somebody did that for me, man. Like that guy, Ben, I told you about, he did shit like that to me. He signed up for a race, boom, and there it is. He's like, all right, we're doing this. And then he just did it to me. He just did it to me after he got off the last podcast. We hit stop on record, and he gets on his computer and he's like, hey, we're doing a 20-mile trail race in September. And I'm like, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? And then as soon as I just like say that, then I'm like, all right, dude, let's do it. I go out buy the trail shoes. I'm out running the trails like, the next day, I just ran in the snow and all that shit. But really very proud of you for the effort you put forward, man. I'd like to hear you describe that, because that was one of the most fun times we've ever had. We must have talked the entire time, 13.1 miles, minus maybe that last 0.1 where we're
And
pouring
when
it
I
out.
tell you, yeah, and when I tell you that was probably like the most intimidating thing that morning, like showing up and saying, I'm going to run a half marathon. Like you said, the 8 miles was like the furthest I've ever run in my life. And that alone was hard. And I did that just by myself, kind of on a whim to kind of just prove myself that I could do some sort of distance running. And I was dealing with sore calf tightness and whatnot for months before. So it was a scary day, but, had the right mindset going in. Like you said, we were just going to crush it. We were going to run together. I was like, okay, we're going to talk a lot. Usually I don't like to talk when I run because it makes you a little
Yeah.
bit more out of breath. And like, it's just a different style when you're approaching a long race like that. You're not, you're pacing yourself. And I didn't have all the fancy tech. I don't have like a wearable. Like I try to avoid that stuff somewhat, but it was so helpful when we got started. Um, you know, you were always tracking our time. Like, all right, we're feeling pretty good at this 9:15 pace. So we kind of knew where we were sitting the whole
Yeah.
way going, which helped us. And I mean, if I go back to like when we first started, I remember like we were lining up in that pocket there, and it was like my heart's like out of my chest. I'm like, well, I don't know why I'm so pumped up, but I'm about to run for like 2.5 hours, whatever it's gonna be. And then we just kicked off, and it was like a beautiful course, and feeling pretty good. But like once you hit a couple of those really tough spots. I remember like I don't know, must have been like mile like 6 or 9 or something. We were going a slight uphill, and I remember my quads were just wanted to explode, and I was like, dude, I don't know, this does not feel good. And I just remember you're just like, dude, you just keep running, it's gonna go away. You just keep running
Yeah.
one at a time,
Yeah.
and it eventually did. It was like another mile or so. I was like, all right, that pain is gone. I didn't even realize it. But really special day. It was emotional, dude. And that last couple miles there was something else. I know we did. I think our fastest mile was like mile 12, right?
Yeah. 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 You know, special, I think, is the right way to put it, because I still remember every second. Like I remember every second from when we when we turned up, you know where Riverwalk Brewery is there? When we turned up to that, like that whatever it was, it's like a riding path or something. And I was hurting, dude. I was like, man, all right, this is tough right now. But like my dad's always told me, he's like, dude, when you finish, like you finish with nothing left. You finish on borrowed energy. So I knew we were going to have to and we were so close to that 2 hours. I wanted to do under 2 hours. And I looked at my watch. I was like, all right, Kyle, we need to fucking go. Like, we need to go right now. And that was awesome, man. And I just remember like totally dumping it out the whole way back. I was just screaming at you the whole way. And then like we come around that corner and the crowd is just on both sides. I'm still screaming. You told me somebody was yelling like, "Yeah, go Kyle!" Like
Well,
they
the
didn't
funny
even know
thing is
you. Like
you're hauling ass. If we get along, we're running along the river. This is like really coming up to the finish line. And you had wheels on at that point. Like you were pulling away from me and you're hustling and I'm, dragging ass, but I'm keeping up, but I'm
oh
definitely
yeah, you were there.
pulling away a little bit. And you were yelling, basically not even looking back. I could hear you. Let's go, Kyle. And random people on the side were like hearing you yell that, and then they were yelling it at me. It was too
It was
funny. But
amazing.
at this point, I didn't even really absorb how close we were to the 2 hour mark. I think that's where like you knew we were sitting. I don't think we were like, I didn't really absorb it. I wasn't even like anticipating that. And then I just remember turning that corner and like when I first saw the clock, it was, 1:59:25 or something like that. And I was like, holy shit. So I just amped it up and crossed the finish line like 10 seconds later. I was like, I can't believe we both just crushed 2 hours.
It's a big deal. That's I didn't realize how under 2 hours is actually a really big deal. So when I saw that we were within striking distance, I was ready to die to get there. It didn't fucking matter if I collapsed. I was going to give it everything I had. So, but crossing that finish line, man, like the emotion, you and I were speechless, dude. I think I just gave you a hug and we just looked at each other. Both our families were there. Our wives were there. It was just like something really fucking special. And I think they were very proud of us. I don't know. I was really happy to share that moment with you, man. It was special, especially because it was just like a call up. It was like, yo, like, let's go do this. We haven't seen each other in like probably 2 years in person. We've probably seen each other in person for a collective amount of like 3 or 4 times. Just call them up. Let's go run this fucking thing together. And it was probably, probably some of the best times I've had in my life, thanks for sharing that with me. It was great.
Thank you, man. That is one day I will never forget, like for sure. No matter how many races you run, that first half marathon. I'm sure the first marathon is a whole different ball game too. But that first half marathon, it's a big goal. We were looking at statistics. What is it, like 1% of the
Yeah, it's
population
1%.
can do that or something?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure a
And
lot more could do that if they had the right mindset and push themselves, but not a lot of people do that.
well, the momentum, right, that I got coming out of that race, I think is what I needed to get this podcast actually like really moving, because I was scared shitless of this thing, dude. Like, especially those solo podcasts. Like, I'm also like, who am I to even be on here telling people, how to get better and these things? It's like, well, you know what? I've lived it. And I'm only going to share what I've lived and the experience I've had. And if you want to take it, that's great. If you want to leave it, no problem too. But the momentum I felt coming out of that, I wish everybody could feel, because there wouldn't be a goal that you couldn't hit if you just kept that momentum going.
I know it's really special, and like you said earlier, the people that were there, like you just felt like you're surrounded with a bunch of people who just that they've got a strong mind and they're strong willed, and like anybody who can just run for that long, like you've gone through some shit to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's healing, it's therapeutic. But it's more than the running. It's more than the running. I always tell people that, and it's hard to put words to it. But if you can run like that, even if you don't run and you can go run a mile, like that's the hardest part of your day. Anything could happen at work, and you're gonna be like, yeah, no problem. At least it's not running fucking 10 miles. Like that was no big deal, right? So anything that comes up on you in life seems easy after all that shit. So you just carry that momentum through. Now related to like a freight train just coming down the tracks. They keep throwing cars in the way and it just fucking blows right through them and just keeps its speed. And I think that's what running has done for me. It's something to kind of like anchor myself in. It's obviously running in the gym and eating right and doing all those things has anchored my life to where now I can really start to dig in. I can really start to do things that challenge me. And, that kind of brings us to this most ridiculous thing I think we've ever done coming up pretty soon. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. That's I think we were both texting last week talking about probably the most intimidating thing. And it's funny, like we're both, pretty in shape guys. We could probably hold our own, someone trying to attack us or something. But signing up for a couple, intro jiu-jitsu classes is scary stuff.
It's nuts, dude. I was thinking about it the other night. It's like, it's been a long time since I've like wrestled with my brother or wrestled with my father. Like growing up, we always used to wrestle like down in the basement. My father used to wrestle with us. We used to used to get it going. And I was laying on the ground rolling my back out last night, and I was visualizing a full grown adult like laying on top of me trying to choke my fucking head off. And I'm like, this is going to be something special. Like it's been a long time since somebody's tried to choke me. You know what I mean? So I'm pumped.
Yeah.
Really pumped.
Yeah. I know. I was just getting my mouthpiece set up earlier and, thinking about it. I'm like, all right, this is going to be like, walking in there at 5 o'clock tomorrow is going to feel weird, but just go in there, be a sponge, not be afraid to get beat up, by a girl or whoever's there. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So it's funny because I think I shared with you the whole kind of story about how I got to this point. And I think it's actually something that needs to be shared because it speaks to how closely our brains are aligned right now. Because I truly believe that we've been doing similar things and we've been watching each other over the years, where now our brains are on the same kind of circuit, right? So for me, the whole jiu-jitsu thing was I went and met with a customer of mine who happened to fight in the UFC, right? And we were talking, a lot about personal growth and different things before we were talking about business. But then obviously we started talking about jiu-jitsu, and he's like, I was telling him how I was scared of it. I've wanted to do it for 4 or 5 years. And we just kind of discussed it. The way he put it and how calm and confident he was, he's just like, you should just sign up. And like Mike Ivanov, like 3 or 4 years ago, would have been like, yeah, I'll sign up, and then not done it. You know what I mean? But the guy I am now, with the momentum that we've been building over these years, right? Through the Murph and through, anchoring in the gym and then the marathon and the podcast, all these things. It's like, well, I just looked this individual in the face and told him I was going to sign up. So guess I'm fucking signing up. So I'm driving back to the office, and I just pull over and sign up. And as soon as I did that, I was like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, I knew that if I thought about it, Kyle, or if I said, oh, am I too busy? Will it fit my schedule? I don't want to get hurt. If I let any of those thoughts come into my head, I wouldn't have signed up. So when I got back to the office, I mentioned it to a friend of yours that I was doing jiu-jitsu. And he's like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Because I was talking to Kyle yesterday or Sunday, and this was like a Monday. He wants to start doing jiu-jitsu too. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, man. And I told him to call you and tell you that. But then I just couldn't hold back. So I had to hit you up that night. And then you said something to me that blew my mind too.
Dude, this was weird. Like, this was
It
really
was weird.
It almost was unbelievable. I told my wife the story after, and she was like, you're kidding. But so, like you said, that weekend I had, and even I guess a couple weeks before that, I was up to dinner with my brother and two of our other close friends. And I had mentioned it, like just saying, like, I thought about, signing up for jiu-jitsu. I think it'd be, really good thing for me to do mentally, kind of just like, whether it's fitness wise or learning or just kind of getting out of the comfort zone. So I put it out there. And like you said, a lot of times you put that comment out there, like, if you're like us, like, you got to hold yourself to it. Cause
that's right.
Like, what is your words? What are they worth? So, but then, I had just a couple days, whatever it was last weekend now, and having breakfast with the friend you mentioned, I told him about it. And basically, like, the next day I'm showering, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm in the shower. I'm like, I really should sign up for jiu-jitsu. They got it's super easy. It's down the street. Like, I already looked at this place. It seems pretty cool. I was like, I should probably just tell Mike Ivanov about it. But like, I did. I was like, I bet if I told him about it, I'd be signing up. And I still figured out if I wanted to do it that quickly. I was like, I know I'm going to do this, but like, I'm still a little nervous. And I get out of the shower and I walk over to my phone, and it literally is your text. Like, I forget what the words were exactly, but you were like, dude, I'm signing up for jiu-jitsu. I'm like, this is weird. So basically, I was like, at that point, I was like, well, I guess I'm signing up now.
That's
So there
right.
it
That's
goes.
right.
I know. It's
It's
so
a
funny.
beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing because I don't think if I hadn't been, watching people like you and working with some other people like my buddy Ben, and I don't think I would have been able to do that. And then if I didn't believe in pushing others and trying to lead in that regard, I wouldn't even have mentioned it to you, right? So, but I think that me mentioning it to you makes you think twice in your head, like, I can do more. I mean, you're flying out to Miami for work. You're all over the place. You got all these commitments, outside of work. And, I always talk about people that make the excuse they're too busy. And, you're never a guy that ever heard that come from, like, getting on the podcast for an hour on a Sunday night. Like, that's probably the last thing anybody wants to do. Right. But you make time for it. And I think that you are a testament to that, because you're doing so many different things. You're successful at so many different things. We're not even talking about like what you do for work and then how you've rised up throughout your career in that regard. But it's all one thing. It's momentum and it's mindset, and you have been able to do that. And again, it has transformed my mindset. It's transformed my life. Just working with you, knowing that you're out there. Like sometimes, Kyle, to be honest, it's like. This fucking guy, like I can't let this guy pick up too much distance on me. Like, so you know what? When I'm laying in bed, like the other night or the other morning, it was 7 a.m. And, I wake up and it's like so cozy in my apartment. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I look outside, it's snowing. And I'm like, oh man, like I need to get some miles in. But I could just lay in bed, my wife's there, everywhere comfy, right? It's like, oh, just get back in bed. Like, fuck this. Put my fucking shoes on. I go drive over to the local farm. I run the local trails. Um, Beautiful, beautiful place, in the snow. And then I send you a picture, and I do that because I'm like, you know what? I gotta fucking rattle him. If he's feeling maybe a little down this day, maybe this will give him that little extra push. And it's not to be a show off or to be that way. It's just, it's people do that shit to me. You do that to me. It's like, that helps me. There's times where I'm feeling like a little down and it's like, oh, wait, nope. Somebody else is out there doing it. I can't lose a step. Like, let's go. And that's why that accountability tree and your circle is so important.
It's very true. And the other thing too that I always, like I'm natural, like a lot, I feel like people who are maybe sitting on the sidelines and like wish they were doing more, maybe they just feel like, oh, like how are these people so much energy and so driven and so, maybe I'm just lazy. Like I think I'm a naturally lazy person, dude. I love laying in bed. Like, I'm not never always been like a really more of a morning person, a little more of a night owl. And that, I pay for that in mornings, a lot.
Yeah.
And it's something that I need to kind of like constantly work on. But um, I'm someone like maybe if I do stay in bed in the morning, like I'll be doing the workout late at night, doing some work stuff at midnight if I have to, like because I've got stuff that I need to get done, and I just don't feel like myself if I don't do it right. So, but if you're out there and you feel like you're just too lazy, like yeah, maybe that's a problem, but like you can do it. It's not like we're like different people. It's just like you just got to put the mind to it and just make it not even an option.
I love that you said that. It's very important because times where I'm feeling weak, and I'm off Instagram now. So this is also a struggle now. I've been off for, I think it's almost like a week and some change now. And that's obviously there's a strategy to that, we can talk about another time. But when I would be on Instagram, I'd see you like flying down to Miami for work, right? You're down there, obviously, working around the clock. And it's like 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night and you're closing the gym down. And I'm like, you know what? I'm proud to call that guy my friend because that's the shit that matters. And for me, there's so many people I talk to that are like, I don't have time. And I'm like, would you just fucking stop? Don't fucking say it because there's a million other people that are doing way more than you, way busier, and they make time for all these things. There's high level CEOs out there, right, that are literally working more than I think I could ever handle in my life. But they're still out there eating healthy. They're still out there crushing the gym. They're doing charity work. They're doing all this shit. So the way I look at that is I can always do more, but I just have to say yes.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
I have to
that's the
say
right
yes.
mindset. Yeah, and like you said, there's always an example, whether it's you parent of multiple kids or whatever it is. Like, there's always someone out there who's like in your situation or in a more challenging, lifestyle that gets it done. You have to sacrifice some things, and sure, there's some sort of breaking point. You got to make sure you give enough attention to the home life, your marriage, all this stuff. And that just requires more work. If you're a busier person, you got to compartmentalize a little bit better, be more efficient. But that's all part of the stew that you got to focus on.
Yeah, I think when you talk about energy, right? I get a lot of energy from you. I get a lot of energy from just like two or three other people in my life um, that's what they're there for. But at the same time, everything I do that is hard gives me more energy, right? So I think people would think, well, you go out and run 5 miles. How does that give you energy? Or you go out and run the half marathon. How does that give you energy? It's the energy in knowing that like I can bet on myself to do whatever needs to be done. Like that's where the confidence comes from. And 4 or 5 years ago when we met, my confidence level wasn't where it is today. I mean, I have a true belief that there's nothing I can't do. And the more things I keep challenging myself with and I keep succeeding in, it's like the other day, I came home from work and I'm like, holy shit, like I have like all of this momentum behind me. It's mind blowing, but it's only because I've like tuned in all of these different things, right? I've tuned in the diet, I've tuned in the sleep, which we've talked about, right? I've tuned in all of these things that to help give me an angle. And I was talking to somebody the other day. It's like, listen, I'll do anything that gives me an angle, and it resonated with me because I say the same shit. So like, I'll do all of these things, and yes, they take time, and yes, they take sacrifice, but I have twice the energy of everybody else. And I just don't see why everybody else wouldn't want to just jump on that fucking bandwagon. So that's why I'm trying to do this podcast, is just let everybody know, like, you can do better. You can do more. You can generate your own energy. You can be your own sun. Like, that is all very important things. And that's everything that you're saying right here today.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that like, especially in like the corporate setting, like how often do you hear someone say like, oh, I'm tired. Like, how you doing? Oh, tired. Or like, they just kind of give these kind of half-assed responses that set the tone for your whole day kind of thing, like if you avoid that, like I can't remember the last time I said I'm tired. Like, I don't know. I just don't say it. Maybe
You
sometimes,
can't say it.
but yeah,
No,
you
you
can't.
can't.
Like you might be tired, but, so you're not going to get where you want to be. All right. Like like all that momentum, sometimes you don't feel, you really kind of lean into it when you start to see the results, right? Like
Yes.
I'm more fit. That 5 mile run was way easier than it was 6 months ago. Or like this project that I've been working on is coming together. Like if, whether it's like building a shed, building a car, or a business project, like this all came together and like was successful, because I did XYZ, right? Like every piece of your life kind of does add up like that. So I think it kind of just pays over time.
I like to say stacking the bricks. That's what I like to call it. And it's kind of badass when you think about it. It motivates me. But it's to the point now where like I can visualize something and it'll happen. Um, and most people will be like, dude, look, you need to lay off the drugs. Like that's the first thing somebody would think when I say that. Like, I'm like, yeah, no, like I can visualize and it'll happen. But like it's happening so much lately that I am like really forced to like entertain it and really pay attention to it. And, when you sent me your vision board, that really reinforced like how I was feeling because I mentally visualize all these things. And then you're like, hey, look at this, check out this vision board. And I was like, yeah, dude, like, man, I wonder if I implemented that into my game, if I would be able to visualize and accomplish even better by having that visual cue. And then what's so weird is the day that you sent that to me, this is so weird, but I was on the phone with a cable guy trying to get my cable to work here, the internet, right? And, they're like trying to reboot the modem. And we just got to talking, man. And I could talk to anybody. And we started talking about where he was from. And then, me, I always try to like work it into like, hey, what are your goals for the new year? Like, what's going on? And the guy was talking about how he bought a house. And I was like, oh man, how'd you do that? How'd you accomplish that? And this is like the cable guy that we're talking to, who he's from Tennessee, works for
Yeah.
Xfinity. I'm like, hey, so we're chatting, and it's great. And he says, take a picture and put it on my desk. And every day I looked at it, every single day, and my actions started moving me in that direction. And that is like the most perfect statement on the planet. And it's so true. Like if you visualize these things, the reason you accomplish them is because your actions now change. The things that you would have done that'll bring you wouldn't have done that'll bring they won't bring you closer to that goal. You won't do them. And I've noticed that. So I've been implementing that in my game. And man, it has paid me back like tenfold. And I know you do the same thing because that's why, you had that vision board. But, tell me about that. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
I mean, honestly, like this goes back, I whether it's when I was younger, I would have like certain cars, like a calendar or something, right? Like I remember this was probably 2018 or 2019 at my old desk when I worked for Panera Bread's corporate office. I bought like specifically Porsche 911 calendars like every year. And it was like a running joke. People would be like, oh, like Kyle, like what's the Porsche of the month? Because I wanted one. I was like, if I see this every day, like, when I'm having a rough day at work, whatever, like you got that there, I'm like, just grind. And clearly, like it eventually came true. But like vision board, I've played around with them a bit in past years. I didn't always, like you said, I'd have like little pieces here and there that would be always like in my periph, but I never really did like a lot of like full comprehensive builds. My wife and I talked about it this year, and we have like a list of things that we're focusing on, whether it's like hitting a certain number in the bank account, right? Like you have, if you look at my vision board, there's a couple things on there that you might
Yep.
not know what they mean, right? There's like dollar bills on it, but like we know what that means. And then,
That's right.
there's a trip that we wanted to do forever, right? And like, we're married with no kids now. Like maybe kids will come into the picture one day, but like there's trips that we were like, while we're in this position, if there's a trip that we want to do, it might be expensive. A little stressful to plan. You got to go for like a extended period just because of the distance. But we want to go to Japan. We've always talked about it for several years now. So I'm like, okay, then I'll put picture of like Mount Fuji with an R34 GTR on it.
That's
And
right.
that to me is
Now
like
we're talking.
like I've always loved like JDM cars, and I know for a fact I'll order or I will own another like JDM Legend at some point. But there's opportunities to like obviously see those cars, but also like there's opportunities to rent them around like Mount Fuji, and like that's like just outside of Tokyo, and so like that's like a piece of the trip that I'd like to plan if when we make that happen. Um, but we put that on the vision board, and like already we're like, okay, like let's start mapping out like when's this trip gonna happen, like what are we gonna do, and you just kind of set the tone for the year, right? Like we never really talk about like New Year's like resolutions. We're just like, all right, like what are the goals for this year? Some of them maybe we won't hit because you set like kind of big ones, but if you put them all on the page and they all have like you just start planning out your year, like my actions are going to be based on getting these things done, and hopefully you get them all done. But even if you don't, you're going to be a lot closer than if you didn't have that board.
It's a plan. I talk about it all the time, man. You got to have a plan. You got to have a way to direct that energy. If you don't have a plan, it's like kind of just out there working with no direction, and you get lost quickly. And I didn't always have a plan, man. And I think that's what got me off track. That got me off track. But it was an eye opener, what I've been through and where I am today. But I always wanted to do the podcast, man. And I had it written in my journals. And I've been writing it for months. Like, I want to do it. I want to do it. Because, somebody asked me once, they're like, Mike, what's your deepest desire? And we talked about this offline a little bit, but, my desire is to help people. Like I like to say, I could save a kid 10 years, if they listen to every little step, and I could help somebody through I'm not a doctor, but I could help somebody through a tough time mentally. It's all things to deal with your brain and how to restructure your mindset and all the self-talk that matters, right? So my desire would be to do that. And I was avoiding it. I was running from it. I didn't have that momentum, that confidence. And then, like I said, coming out of that half marathon and just the way I was feeling, I was like, I can't be stopped. And it was like one episode, and it was two episodes. It's like, you know what? I don't care how hard this is. I don't care if I have to do it every weekend. Like, I'm just going to do an episode a week. And, I think we're 4 weeks ahead now, and getting some good feedback. I think people are starting to like listening to it. And obviously I'm getting better. You listen to episode 1 versus episode 13, like there's a different guy there, which is cool to see that progression. But again, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have a plan. I didn't visualize what it looked like. I didn't take the steps, and just not saying I'm too busy, man. And there's a guy I met. He's a CEO of a big company, And he was happened to be a vendor of ours at the time, and I had the pleasure of being able to spend a few dinners with him. And he had given me some advice, and I'd love to get him on the podcast because that'd be great. But he said, Mike, what's made me successful in life, because obviously I asked him, he said, I've just said yes to every single opportunity. And I've been writing that in my journal, and that was giving me power to do this, because I'm like, this is an opportunity. Like, I have to say yes. And even if it's scary. And that's the same with the jiu-jitsu presenting itself. Like, all I could think of is him saying that to me. And he doesn't even know that those little words, how powerful they are for me, but like, they've been propelling me through a lot of shit, because I'm just like, say yes, because I want to be successful, and I want to be the best human being I can be more than I want to breathe, you know? And I think that's when you start to see the wins coming in, when you want it that bad.
Yeah. And especially like we're both kind of like mid 30s ish, right? Like, we're kind of a pivotal time. A lot of like, this is like you're primarily like setting a base for your life. Like, if you really lean in now, even more so if you're in your 20s, like, start early, right? Like you said, if you implement those actions, if you talk to like even one younger guy, say he's in his like early 20s, and you can kind of just give him some of this experience that you and I have, instilled into our lives, like, it makes a huge difference the earlier you start. But it never stops. There's no like real end. Like, you don't feel like you're close to, to where you want to be. Neither do I. But we just, if you focus every year making progress, like, you're going to get there.
You got to love the process. And that's where the running comes in, because there is nothing that solidifies a process like running does. A friend of mine always says, Mike, you just have to love the process. And I'm like, man, I want to fucking be there tomorrow. Like, that's where I want to be, like that's how I am. But over the years of like watching the process, when I'm like looking in my journal, and I was proud of myself for running 4 miles a week. And now it's like 4-mile run is kind of like, why bother? Like, if you're going to put your shoes on, you better do twice that, right? Like, but it's all the process. And again, just like I always say, it's not about the running, but it's the process in everything. It's in the spiritual growth, the mental growth, the physical growth. All of that stuff is all a process. And if you're not reading the books, and you're not, spending your time wisely, and you're just sitting on the internet, cruising, or swiping on your phone, or surrounding yourself with people that just want you to go out and booze at the bar with them, shit like that, like, dude, time to cut that shit loose, man. You want to be successful, it's time to make some changes. But it's hard to tell people that without them experiencing like what we've experienced through, I guess, being in control of our mind. But if someone were to experience what we experienced with that half marathon, I don't think they'd ever stop. Like, that's my whole point.
I know. And on me too, like, I know we mentioned like the Murph a few times. Like, that was I kind of like stepped it up for me in some ways. Cause
Oh yeah.
When I knew that I was like, at some point I wanted to do or host some sort of like high energy, like badass workout event for a good cause. Like, I knew that. And I think it was probably like somewhere around like December 2021. I made an Instagram post. I think I was doing a pull up in it, and I just like basically put that out there. I was like, goal for next year is to do this. And I instantly just jumped right in. I was like, all right, like, my X amount of followers saw that. I was like, I better freaking deliver. And,
Yes.
it was just one of those things. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not an event planner, no idea. But I found like, the right charity, the right people, like knew the money was going to a good cause, supporting veterans. The Murph was like badass workout. The biggest challenge is that some people are afraid of it, right? Like, getting that to scale big is tough, because it's like, it implies that people need to be able to do like a true Murph to come, which, there's several of us that do, but not, that's supposed to be like a scalable workout. And it's more about creating the energy and getting, being there for the right cause, and like supporting, our fallen heroes and such. Like, that's what that event's really about. And, but it keeps growing, trickles. We're like probably like 15-20% growth every year now. So it's, we're going to crush it. I already set a number of $20,000 is the goal for this year. So, got some work to do.
Well, you'll make it. And you know what that is? The amount of like-minded people that you've brought in there, right? And people that have very interesting stories that, you can gain energy from, right? There's a lot of people there that have suffered from a lot of different things, and there's a lot of people there for the right reasons too. But when you started the first one, it was your attitude and the way about you that made it easy to go to, because you were very like, hey, listen, if you guys can't do this exercise, we can fill in with this one. If you're uncomfortable with this, don't worry about it. Just come and show up and hang out. That's like, I think people don't know that about you, how big of your heart is, and how approachable you are. Those are very, very good qualities that I don't think a lot of people realize, like in your social media posts, right? Like no one really gets to know that about you. And I think it just needs to be said, because more than what I like about you as being an athlete and being, someone that pushes me, I think that you also are just a great human being. And I think that you have a big heart and care for everybody. I've never heard you say a negative thing in my life. So, those are all things that are what making you successful and bringing the good energy your way. But I don't think the event would be what it is if it weren't for who you are and the way that you approach it, and the way that you kind of go to market with yourself. So, man, I can't wait to see it grow. It's been banging out, like it's been going crazy. The last time I saw it, there was way more people than the first picture. You take pictures in Ronnie's shop, like, from a top view. It's just nice to see the growth. And I'm excited for this year, because I got some good things going on for me, that I'd like to, talk to some people, meet some people, maybe get some guests for the podcast to come on.
Oh, yeah.
But it's
Good
just like
spot.
that environment that you've built. You've built that environment for people. And, it's kind of like the environment that you have at work, for the very business that you support every day. It's just that come as you are, no matter who you are. We're going to come here. We're all going to share this mindset, and I'm going to try to addict you to getting better every single day, which is great.
Yeah, that was kind of a blessing, like with my career change, because I had mentioned before, I was with, Panera Bread, which is, good company, but, they're certainly not in the business of personal growth, right? Or anything like that. Making people healthier, like that's, they're a better option than fast food. But that was kind of, I spent almost 10 years there, right? And I think I had a mental dilemma in my head. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable eating this stuff every day. Like, how do I, do I really feel good about it? I don't know. So, moving into the fitness space was definitely a welcome to change, and I definitely feel like a good fit. Like, a year or so in now to my newest spot. But yeah, it's fun to hear you call that out, and I appreciate
Well,
all
I
the
mean,
time.
hell yeah, dude. I've been watching, and that's something that we've talked about before, is that you may not think anybody's watching, but there are people out there, and I was one of them watching you. And I think that you've been a big part of a lot of my success and a lot of my mindset changes. And I thank you for that. It's very special. And it's been very impactful. But really, watching you take on that new role where, I mean, most people don't want to get on an airplane to go commute to work. You're doing that, and that's impressive. I'm proud of you. That's way outside of your comfort zone for sure. I know it is. Those late Sunday night flights down there to be ready to work in the morning. And I'm just impressed. It's nice to see. And I got to assume that it was pretty uncomfortable when you first landed that position, but you knew that that's what you needed to do.
Yeah, it was a good opportunity, and it was one of those things, like you said, I kind of knew in my gut that I had to do it, but I was like, this is not going to be easy. Newly married, taking about to be on the road, call it 50% of the time. Like that alone has its own challenges, right? And like, obviously supporting wife is critical in all things. Um, but it's been a super big learning curve, and especially coming into like, not to like toot my horn or anything, but like kind of a pretty senior position where you're not always in person, right? Because I'm there like half the time and really focused on my work a lot when I'm down there. So it's like it's hard to build those relationships. You have to lean in and like become part of the leadership team. Whether it's, again, it doesn't have to be a leadership team. Any team you're in, you need to invest yourself in your people, right? Get to know them on a personal level. Like that's really something I've always kind of invested in work. Make people like, when they think of me, they don't just think of like what your position is or what your work responsibilities are. Like, oh, he's Kyle. He does this. He does that. He's into this. And we talked about something going on in my life. Like those are little moments that I think that have added up in my career. Over time. For whatever those are worth. But I think what's unique about you and I, like a lot of times you can find hundreds of motivational or personal development podcasts out there where people always focus on like the entrepreneurial side of things, right? Like we're kind of like on paper, I always say like I'm just a regular guy, like corporate environment, corporate functions, navigating that world has its own challenges, right? And there's, sure, like the entrepreneurial route is not for everybody. It's super can be super lucrative. It can be a lot more challenging. But to really make your way up the corporate ladder in some ways requires almost the same amount of work. Cause like, I don't know, you really have to like fully invest yourself in something that may or may not pay off, but it can. It's just a different mindset that I think a lot of people. There's not as many people talking about, climbing the corporate ladder outside of on these podcasts. I feel like.
No, there's not. And I'll tell you, the secret to climbing the corporate ladder is show up as yourself, as an authentic individual, and do all the jobs that one day you want to do, and don't fucking bitch about it. You know what I mean? You hear so many people say that's not my job, blah blah blah. Man, give me any job to do. Any job. Give me jobs 3 levels up. I don't care. I'll do it all because guess what? It's just one more piece of knowledge I have, one more bit of confidence I'm going to gain. It's very special. And I like climbing because that's all we're doing every day. We're climbing, and physically, spiritually, mentally, we just keep climbing, right? If the day I run out of ladder, there's a real problem for me. You know what I mean? When I run out of ladder, that's a scary day. So I always need something to be chasing. But you brought up something that I think I never talk about, but you said something about your wife. And makes me think about my wife, because I'm not around a lot. I'm always like I told you, wake up, I'm going running, I'm going doing this, I'm doing the podcast, like blah 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 blah. And it's like, hey, can I get an hour just to like sit down with you and stuff? But I think that if it weren't for how supportive my wife is, I wouldn't be the guy I am today. We've been together. God, we met in college. It's got to be 18, 19 years now. And she's been a spectator to the rise and fall, and then the rebuild, and the strength that she has to sit here and support me doing these things. It seems a lot like your wife, and I know that's true about your wife because you wouldn't be able to accomplish what you're accomplishing today without a very strong woman in your corner. And that's a strong message I think that young men need to know, even guys that are married. It's you got to take care of that person that's backing you up, and if you find a special one, you need to realize how lucky you are. And I do everything in my life to try to provide a better life, for us, and in our small family that we have. It's just the two of us, but it just, when you said that, it just got me thinking, Kyle. So thanks for saying that, because I don't think my wife gets enough credit, but I think she's a huge part of who I am. Like coming home, hey Devin, I'm doing jiu-jitsu. She's like, yeah, dude, cool. All right, man. Like, good luck. Like, hey, I'm doing the podcast. She's like, all right, yeah, cool, man. Like, you can do it. And then like I'll be like kind of have like a great day at something, and I'll come home all excited. Be like, can you believe it? She's like, guy, like, I'm not surprised. And I'm like, man, this person like truly believes in me. And it's great when you come home and rest your head next to somebody like that.
Truly, man, that's like, it's a make or break decision for anybody, right? Like marrying the wrong person or someone who's not supportive. And I think a perfect example is literally where I'm sitting right now, right? Like we bought this house together, right? I think like a year before we got married. So we were engaged, but not married yet. But like, basically knew going into it that she's like, given how much of a car enthusiast I am, she basically was like, I'm not going to get a garage spot. Like, and then she knew I wanted to do all this stuff in the garage, remodel it,
She
like
loves you.
blow a hole in the wall so I could like put an extra car inside if I need to, like little things like that. Like, there's a lot of women out there that would never even allow that. So I
Not a
always take a step
chance.
back. I'm like, well, and to your point, that's kind of like a funny point, but all the little things like, like when I wanted to do something or want to do the Murph, she's always willing to help organize. She like does so much. And when it comes to like keeping yourself dialed in diet wise and just like routine wise, right? Like someone who supports all that. It's huge. It's huge. And especially like, I don't know, again, like neither of us have dipped our toes in the parenting world, but I'm sure that layers on a whole new level of challenges. But you got to have the right team player for sure.
It's hard to find, dude. And they must be building them at UNH because that's where my wife went. I know that's
Right.
where your wife went. So
Yeah. Hey, man.
any advice to anybody out there if they're looking for a very strong, supportive wife, maybe they should cruise UNH and see what they can find. But yeah, man, it's just funny how like 6 degrees of separation here. How we've all kind of you and I never even came across each other up there. Obviously, different age groups and whatnot, but it's just funny, small world. And I don't know. It's like everybody gets put in your life for a reason, and it's interesting because as I talk about momentum and I talk about these wins coming, it's like people just keep getting put in my life. Like people just show up, like like just like I was telling you about, the customer that I was, Joey Gomez, right? He's the guy with, that fought in the UFC. He's the guy that mentioned the jiu-jitsu to me. And I don't think he realizes how impactful what he said is going to be to my journey. But or he might not even know who I am. You know who I am. So it's like when you tell somebody something like me that, it's like, okay, yep, that's the next journey. That's the next rest of my life. That's just locking it in for life. And everybody says that's like how you get better as a person and you become more confident and all these things. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm sure he thinks like, oh yeah, and he's going to go do a couple classes and have a good time. No, it's like, no, dude, like, I'm sorry, but this is the rest of my life. Here we go.
That's awesome. And I had kind of a realization moment earlier in this podcast. I was hearing you say like, butter me up, if you will, about things that I've helped you do or helped like instill in you. And a lot of times, dude, those are like, I didn't think anything of them. I'm just like, I just shared with him what works for me and helped to motivate him, see his inner, what his inner drive is capable of in some ways. Right. And like, you've taken it to the next level. I can't sit here and say that I, can outrun you. You kept me going in that half marathon. Right. So it's like, it's pretty cool to see, but like every little interaction, and you're at this point now, as you start to get like influential and people are listening to your podcast, like there's little tidbits that they'll pull from this and think about it 10 years from now and say like that changed something. That's really special.
I appreciate that a lot because when I was at my worst, there was nothing like this to listen to, when I was having some real problems. I had to draw from different places. I had to read this book. I had to subscribe to the David Goggins way of thinking, which I know a lot of people are controversial on, but it saved my life. And then I had to go kind of watch this guy for that and this guy for that. So my whole thing is I'm trying to build like just a playbook, that somebody can roll into and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And the thing is that if you just fucking listen and you just do exactly how it's laid out, you'll get it done. I feel like we overcomplicate things. So like now that I'm like way past where I used to be, looking down on like the process, the whole problem was me. And the identity that I had for myself, the stories I told myself, I was the whole problem. We're in control. There's two people in this one body, right? There's the mind that wants to take the easy way out. And then there's me who knows what the right thing to do is. And well, I've got a few more wins over the guy that wants to be comfortable. And I think that's when you start breaking free from the pack. And I was telling somebody the other day, my role now is to give everybody energy. That's my role as a person. And no matter where I am, whether it's at the bank teller, the random guy at the gym, somebody at work, my job is to get in a conversation with those people, try to figure out how to help them with whatever they're struggling with, even if it's just a smile and a funny story, high five, any of that shit. That's my role now because people have done that for me. You've done that for me. You've given me the energy. This person's given me the energy. I've taken it. I've accomplished things with it. So now my job is to take my energy, give it to others. But the best part is I get so much energy in return for that. It's an exchange. And it just keeps fueling me. And I'm at a place right now, it's like fucking jet fuel in my veins, man. Like I can't be stopped. I can't. I just am so fortunate to be that way right now.
Yeah. And that like realization of that and basically holding yourself accountable for like giving that out, putting it out in the world. Really, the energy you give off in the world like just pays dividends, and I think that alone is going to lead to a lot of success and a lot of good relationships, and people will always remember you.
But that's how I view you. So my view on you, when I always see you interacting, it's you're always giving that energy out, no matter what. Like I've never seen you like head in your hands or like avoiding a conversation or not smiling. So I have had something to look at and say, okay, yep, that somebody else is doing that. All right, I like how that looks. Let me see if I can, amplify that. Right. It all the way down to like I had a great day the other day. I told you I went out for a run in that snowstorm, and then I went to the butcher shop and didn't know anybody in the butcher shop, but just kind of went in there. My wife always makes fun of me because she's like, the food you eat is your personality, like, and your running is your personality. And she was fucking around, but so I get in a conversation about ground beef, because I've been eating ground beef like every day for the last 3 weeks, and I'm like got this amazing energy, talking to the butcher about it. I'm telling him about it. He's telling me how he makes it, and we were in there for 30 minutes talking about everything from ground beef to boats. But you know what? At the end of the day, I know I left that guy with massive energy that he didn't have before I walked in there, and I left with another relationship. And then I go to the next place, I stop, I got to run another errand. I'm at the coffee shop and I'm talking to some random person in line. I end up talking to them for 15 minutes, some random stranger. And I know that I made an impact on them and changed the course of their day. And that's just what I'm going to keep doing. If you go about your day every day with the plan to try to meet a stranger, to try to change the energy for somebody, I just can't imagine it not coming back tenfold to you. And that's just what I've been doing. And Kyle, it's been fucking crazy, man. I feel so fortunate. Yeah, I feel so
Work.
fortunate to have that right now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
dude, keep it up, man. That's special stuff. It
Yeah.
really is.
So listen, before we wrap it up, right? I think the question that I need to ask you would be, if someone like listening to this, right, is feeling stuck in life or in a rut, right? Um, Maybe their momentum is kind of stalled out. What's your advice to get them moving again? What's the first step they got to take?
Honestly, I always kind of say like it's one foot in front of the other. If you know that you're stuck and you haven't, you clearly, if you're stuck, you have not been investing in your health, in your fitness, in your work. Like you haven't been investing across all things because I don't know anybody who does all that and it feels stuck. So you got to like realize that it's time to just one foot in front of the other, get your shit done, create a plan, understand what you can fit into your day, and like just start implementing. Because it's again that energy is going to build off itself, and it sucks to hear that because people are like, "There's no magic pill." There really isn't. Like it's just one day at a time. If you have to check off a win for the day, figure out what that looks like, and just do it. Can't you don't go to sleep until it's done. And I think that's like the best way to get started. You do that for a week, you might be like, okay, that sucked, but I feel a little bit better. You do it for a month, you're like, wow, like I feel like I've got a ton of energy and things are looking a little bit better. Maybe my work relationships are going a little better. I'm doing X amount of weight at the gym. Like you start to build momentum, and then you really just have to build that into your daily routine. I don't know if that's the best answer, but that's how I've always kind of looked at it. Is like it's just non-negotiable stuff that you have to do and know that it's going to bring the results that you want to see. And you might not see them for a year, you might not see them for 2 years, but you'll feel the momentum on the way.
I love it. That resonates with me 100%. Gotta build the machine. I keep bolting shit on, right? Just
Yeah.
keep bolting it on. Bolt it on, boom, make it part of your day, make it part of that routine, and then bolt more on. And before you know it, you're doing all these things that automatically that you never thought you could even do. And they become easy. And then you start looking for other things. And yeah, so great, man. Thanks for bringing the fire tonight.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. This is I'm sure it's not the last time I'll be on here, dude. We got some
No,
fun stuff coming tomorrow, right? Like we're kicking off our jiu-jitsu journey. So that's something. But no, this was a great conversation, man. Always good to catch up with you.
yeah, well, thanks for making the time. And again, yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night on the mats. We'll see how we sort that shit out. That's gonna be chapter one to something very exciting.
I think so. I'm ready, man.
All right,
Appreciate
brother.
it.
Well, listen, we're gonna get out of here. Have a great night. Thanks for making the time for me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. We'll see you.